Loonshots: How to Nurture the Crazy Ideas That Win Wars, Cure Diseases, and Transform Industries by Safi Bahcall. Picture this. It's the summer of 1940. The world is teetering on the edge of disaster. Nazi Germany has become a nightmare, armed with technology that makes the Allies look like they're fighting with sticks and stones. Their U-boats are choking off the Atlantic, their Air Force rules the skies, and their scientists are racing toward the atomic bomb. Churchill later called it the Secret War, a desperate race for technological dominance, and he understood that, without winning it, all the courage and sacrifice in the world would be meaningless. In Washington, a straight-laced MIT engineer named Vannevar Bush feels the urgency in his gut. He quits his job, heads to the Capitol, and somehow talks his way into a meeting with President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The entire meeting lasts just 10 minutes. In those brief moments, Bush convinces the president to create something unprecedented: a National Department of Crazy Ideas, a sanctuary where wild, fragile breakthroughs could survive instead of being crushed by military bureaucracy. That single decision, that one 10-minute conversation, would reshape the war and, honestly, the entire modern world. What Vannevar Bush grasped was a secret that history's greatest leaders and companies have discovered and forgotten over and over again. It's the answer to a mystery that haunts us. Why do legendary, innovative teams, from Nokia to Merck to Disney, suddenly and inexplicably lose their magic? Why do brilliant teams, full of good intentions and smart people, end up killing their best ideas? This question sits at the heart of Safi Bahcall's brilliant book, Loonshots. Bahcall, who's both a physicist and biotech entrepreneur, doesn't give us fuzzy theories about culture. Instead, he takes us on a fascinating journey through history, science, and business to reveal the hidden forces that shape how groups behave. He shows us that nurturing innovation isn't about motivational posters or beanbag chairs in the break room. It's about structure. It's about understanding a beautiful concept from physics called a phase transition, the same principle that explains why a tiny drop in temperature transforms rigid ice into flowing water. Today I want to share the core lessons from this incredible book. By the end, you'll understand the crucial difference between a moonshot and a loonshot. You'll discover why the most important breakthroughs are often the most fragile. And most importantly, you'll gain a new lens for viewing the world, a practical set of rules for becoming someone who creates innovative surprises rather than getting blindsided by them. This isn't just a summary. It's your guide to unlocking creative potential in any team, any company, and even within yourself. Let's start with a simple but powerful distinction. We've all heard the term moonshot. It means a big, ambitious goal, like landing on the moon. It's the kind of project everyone rallies behind, with overflowing budgets and widespread support. But Safi Bahcall introduces us to something completely different: the loonshot. A loonshot is that neglected project, the idea everyone dismisses. Its champion is often written off as a little bit crazy, maybe even unhinged. Think about it. The most important breakthroughs rarely arrive with fanfare and applause. They're fragile. They stumble through long, dark tunnels filled with skepticism and doubt. Their champions are often ridiculed or fired long before their ideas see daylight. This is the central tragedy that Loonshots tackles. We have mountains of books about innovation, yet we watch our most creative companies fall off cliffs repeatedly. Take Nokia. In the early 2000s, they sold half the smartphones on Earth. They were celebrated as the least hierarchical, big company in the world. Their CEO talked proudly about a culture where mistakes were acceptable. Then, in 2004, some Nokia engineers developed a prototype for something revolutionary: a phone with a big color touchscreen, a high-resolution camera, and an online app store. Sound familiar? The leadership team, the very same people praised for their innovative culture, shot down both ideas. 3 years later, Steve Jobs stood on a stage in San Francisco and unveiled the iPhone. A few years after that, Nokia had become irrelevant. The people were the same. The culture was the same. So what happened? Bahcall argues we've been looking in the wrong place. We obsess over culture, but we should be examining structure. He introduces a fascinating analogy from physics, the phase transition. Imagine a bathtub full of water. Hit the surface with a hammer, and it just splashes through. It's a liquid. Now, lower the temperature. At 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 Celsius, the water freezes. Those exact same water molecules which were flowing freely moments ago are now locked into a rigid, solid structure. Hit it with a hammer now, and the ice shatters. The molecules are identical, but their collective behavior is completely different. One is a liquid, the other is a solid. They exist in different phases, and the switch between them is sudden and dramatic. Bahcall proposes that human organizations behave exactly the same way. Being good at nurturing wild early-stage ideas, Loonshots, is like existing in a liquid phase. Being good at scaling up proven successes, what he calls franchises, is like being in a solid phase. You can't exist in two phases simultaneously any more than water can be both solid and liquid at once. And the switch between these phases gets triggered by small changes in organizational structure, just as a small temperature change triggers water freezing. This brings us to the story of the man who first mastered this principle, even if he didn't use these exact words, Vannevar Bush. During World War II, the U.S. military was a massive, franchise-focused organization. It was incredibly efficient at producing more of the same: more ships, more planes, more guns. It operated in a solid, rigid phase. But to win the secret war of technology against Germany, it needed something entirely different. It needed a liquid creative phase, a phase that allowed scientists, as Bush wrote, the independence and opportunity to explore the bizarre. Bush knew he couldn't change the military's culture. Yelling at ice molecules to loosen up won't turn them into water. So instead, he created a new structure. He went to President Roosevelt and established the OSRD, the Office of Scientific Research and Development. It was a national department of Loonshots, completely separate from the military's command structure. This is the first great rule of nurturing innovation: separate the phases. You must separate your artists, the people responsible for high-risk, early-stage Loonshots, from your soldiers, the people responsible for already successful steady-growth franchises. The artists need a sheltered environment, a nursery, where their fragile, ugly baby ideas can grow without being crushed by well-meaning soldiers who are trained to spot flaws and eliminate risk. This separation was key to one of the war's most important breakthroughs: radar. The basic principle of radar was actually discovered by two U.S. Navy scientists back in 1922, 18 years before Bush's meeting with the president. They wrote a letter to their superiors explaining how radio waves could detect enemy ships in fog or darkness. Their idea was ignored. It was a classic Loonshot, buried inside a franchise organization. It wasn't until Vannevar Bush's OSRD created a separate, protected space, a Loonshot nursery, that the technology finally got developed with proper urgency. In a lab at MIT, a team led by Alfred Loomis worked around the clock to develop microwave radar, a version so small it could be carried on planes and ships. This portable radar system became the weapon that ultimately won the Battle of the Atlantic. German U-boats had been sinking Allied supply ships faster than they could be replaced. Britain was facing starvation. But once Allied bombers got equipped with microwave radar, they could hunt submarines day and night, through clouds and fog. In May 1943, Allied shipping losses dropped by 95% in just 90 days. The German admiral Karl Donitz later wrote that the Allies won not through superior tactics, but through his superiority in the field of science. However, separating the artists and soldiers isn't enough. This is where so many companies stumble. They create a shiny new innovation lab, put it in a separate building, and then wonder why nothing valuable emerges. This is the Park Trap, named after Xerox's legendary Palo Alto Research Center, which invented the personal computer, the laser printer, and the graphical user interface, but failed to commercialize any of them. This brings us to the second great rule: create dynamic equilibrium. The two groups, the artists and the soldiers, must be able to communicate effectively. Projects and feedback must flow easily between them. The leader's job isn't to be a Moses, anointing holy loonshots from on high. The leader's job is to be a gardener, tending to the transfer between the two groups. You have to manage the touch and the balance, ensuring neither side dominates the other. Bush was a master gardener. He didn't invent radar or the atomic bomb. He famously wrote, "I made no technical contribution whatever to the war effort." Instead, he focused on the transfer. When generals initially refused to even look at the new radar technology, Bush didn't argue. He called up the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, and got him on an experimental plane. The next day, the chiefs of the Army and Air Force found notes on their desks from Stimson. "I've seen the new radar equipment. Why haven't you?" This transfer works both ways. When early aircraft radar proved useless, Bush didn't blame the technology. He made sure pilots went back and talked to the scientists. The problem, it turned out, wasn't the technology. It was the user interface. It was too complicated for pilots to use in the heat of battle. The scientists quickly created a simpler display, and pilots started using radar. A key part of maintaining this dynamic equilibrium is loving your artists and soldiers equally. This is harder than it sounds. Artists tend to favor artists. Soldiers favor soldiers. The book gives a powerful example in the story of Steve Jobs' first stint at Apple. He famously called his Macintosh team pirates and artists, while dismissing the team working on the successful Apple II franchise as regular Navy or bozos. The hostility he created was so toxic that it undermined both groups and ultimately led to his exile from the company. When Jobs returned to Apple 12 years later, he had learned this lesson. He had learned to love his artists, like designer Joni Ive, and his soldiers, like operations guru Tim Cook, equally. So we have two rules: separate the phases and create dynamic equilibrium. But there's another layer here. Not all loonshots are the same. Bahcall introduces two types. There are P-type loonshots, which are breakthroughs in product or technology. Think of the jet engine or the instant camera. Then there are S-type loonshots, which are breakthroughs in strategy or business model. Think of Walmart's strategy of placing huge stores in small towns, or American Airlines' invention of the frequent flyer program. Most leaders have a blind side. They're naturally drawn to one type of loonshot and tend to ignore the other. This can be fatal. The story of Pan Am Airlines perfectly illustrates this. Its legendary founder, Juan Trippe, was a master P-type innovator. He was obsessed with bigger, faster planes. He drove the creation of the China Clipper, which opened up trans-Pacific flight, and he single-handedly ushered in the jet age by forcing Boeing to build the 707. For decades, Pan Am dominated international travel by turning the wheel of P-type innovation. A new plane led to a bigger franchise, which funded an even bigger, better plane. But in his obsession with shiny new technology, Tripp completely missed the S-type loonshots transforming the industry from within. While he was betting the company on the enormous Boeing 747, a scrappy CEO at American Airlines named Bob Crandall was inventing nerdy, unglamorous new strategies. He came up with two-tier pay scales to lower costs, the Super Saver fare to fill empty seats, and a computerized reservation system called Sabre that gave American a massive advantage. When the airline industry was deregulated in 1978, the rules suddenly changed. Efficiency and strategy, S-type loonshots, became the keys to survival. Pan Am, with its fleet of giant, half-empty 747s, was caught on its blind side. It began a slow decline and eventually disappeared. American Airlines, led by S-type innovator Crandall, was the only major carrier to survive the chaos without going bankrupt. This brings us to a dangerous pattern that even the most brilliant leaders can fall into: the Moses trap. This happens when a visionary leader becomes the sole judge and jury of new ideas. Instead of being a gardener who tends to the system, the leader becomes a Moses, raising his staff and anointing the chosen loonshot. He falls in love with his own brand of loonshots and ignores all others. Edwin Land, the genius founder of Polaroid, fell into this trap. Land was a master P-type innovator, the inventor of the polarizer and the instant camera. He built Polaroid into a beloved technology giant. But as he grew more powerful, he began to act for love of loonshots rather than strength of strategy. He poured 10 years and $500 million into a technologically miraculous project called Polavision, an instant home movie system. At the 1977 shareholder meeting, he gave a dazzling demonstration, announcing a second revolution in photography. The product was a technological marvel. It was also a commercial disaster. It was expensive, the film cassettes were short, and cheaper, more convenient videotape was just around the corner. At the same time Land was obsessing over Polavision, he was actively advising President Nixon on top-secret spy satellite technology. He was one of the earliest and most forceful advocates for digital photography, arguing for its potential years before Sony or Kodak were even in the game. He understood the P-type loonshot of digital perfectly, but he missed the S-type loonshot. For decades, Polaroid had made its money selling film, not cameras. The idea of a camera with no film seemed absurd. There's no way that can make any money, they said. Land, the P-type Moses, was blind to the new strategies that digital could enable. Polavision nearly bankrupted the company, and its failure to embrace digital eventually finished the job. So how do you escape the Moses trap? The answer lies in the third great rule: spread a system mindset. This is a lesson Steve Jobs learned the hard way. During his first tour at Apple, he was the ultimate Moses, anointing the Macintosh as his holy loonshot and creating chaos in the process. After being exiled, he repeated the exact same pattern at his next company, Next, building a beautiful, powerful, and wildly expensive computer that nobody bought. But something changed him. During his wilderness years, Jobs invested in a small computer graphics group that had been spun out of Lucasfilm. He bought it for its hardware, another P-type loonshot he hoped to champion. That hardware failed. But a tiny animation unit within the company, which Jobs had tried to shut down, survived. That company was Pixar. At Pixar, Jobs watched Ed Catmull and John Lasseter build a completely different kind of organization. They weren't Moses-like leaders, they were gardeners. They built a system, the famous Brain Trust, where artists and soldiers, creatives and technicians could give each other honest feedback. They nurtured their ugly babies, the early, awkward versions of their films, while also feeding the beast, the need to deliver successful franchise sequels. They practiced dynamic equilibrium. Jobs learned to step back. He learned to manage the system, not just the projects. When he returned to Apple in 1997, he was a different leader. He still had his passion for P-type loonshots like the iPod and the iPhone. But he also embraced S-type loonshots, like the iTunes Store, which sold songs for 99 cents when everyone else thought piracy made that impossible. He brought in a master soldier, Tim Cook, and empowered him. He transformed from a Moses into a gardener. He built a system. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the why. Why do these phase transitions happen? Why do small groups feel so different from large ones? Bahcall returns to physics. He explains that in any group there are two competing forces, a microscopic tug-of-war. On one side you have your stake in the outcome. In a small startup, if the project succeeds, everyone's a hero and a millionaire. If it fails, everyone's job hunting. The stake is incredibly high. On the other side you have the perks of rank. As a company grows larger, your individual contribution matters less to the overall outcome. The perks of getting promoted, a bigger salary, a better title, more influence, start looking more attractive than the high-risk, uncertain payoff of championing a loonshot. The magic number is the size at which the tide turns in this tug-of-war. It's the point where the perks of rank begin to outweigh the stake in outcome. For many organizations, this number hovers around 150 employees. It's the point where politics starts creeping in, and the invisible axe begins falling on crazy new ideas. This isn't some mystical number wired into our brains. It's the result of organizational structure, and that means we can change it. This is the fourth and final rule: raise the magic number. How? By adjusting the control parameters. You can increase the stake in outcome by tying rewards more closely to project success, not just company-wide earnings. You can celebrate results, not just rank. You can reduce the return on politics by making promotion decisions more objective and less dependent on lobbying your boss. You can increase project skill fit, making sure people are working on projects that truly stretch and excite them. You can widen the management span in your Loonshot groups, encouraging more peer-to-peer feedback and less top-down control. These are the levers. These are the ways you can keep the innovative liquid phase feeling alive, even as your organization grows. In the end, Loonshots takes this powerful idea and applies it to the grandest scale of all: world history. Why did the scientific revolution happen in the fragmented, competing city-states of Western Europe, and not in the far wealthier and more advanced empires of China or India? Because, Bahcall argues, those large empires were franchise-driven. They focused on massive projects like the Great Wall or the Taj Mahal. They had no patience for loonshots. Western Europe, on the other hand, was the world's loonshot nursery. If an idea was rejected by a king in Denmark, its champion, like the astronomer Tycho Brahe, could simply pack up and find a new patron in Prague. This ecosystem of separated but connected states created the perfect conditions for the mother of all loonshots, the scientific method, to take root and flourish. And that's the final profound lesson of this book. The same principles that help a small team build a breakthrough product are the same principles that helped a collection of small nations change the course of human history. It's a timeless pattern, a deep truth about how the world works, and it all starts with learning how to nurture the crazy ideas that everyone else dismisses. As we wrap up our journey through Loonshots, I want to reflect on what makes this book so special. In a world flooded with business advice, Safi Bahcall has given us something genuinely new. He hasn't just offered a list of tips, he's provided a new way of seeing. The most powerful idea for me is the shift in mindset from being a Flooder Moses to being a gardener. We're so often taught to admire the visionary leader who has all the answers, the one who points the way and commands the future into existence. But Loonshots shows us the profound danger in that model. The Moses trap is seductive. When you've had a few successes, it's easy to believe you have a special gift for picking winners. But as the stories of Tripp, Land, and even the early Steve Jobs show us, that path often leads to a dangerous blindside, where you become so focused on your favorite type of loonshot that you miss the one that's about to make you obsolete. The gardener, on the other hand, plays a more humble but far more powerful role. The gardener doesn't command the flowers to grow, they create the conditions for growth. They tend to the soil, manage the sunlight and water, and protect the delicate seedlings. They focus on the system, not just the outcome of a single plant. This is the essence of a system mindset. It's about asking how we make decisions, not just what decisions we made. It's about analyzing our wins with the same rigor as our losses, because a good outcome doesn't always mean we had a good process. Sometimes, we just get lucky. And luck isn't a sustainable strategy. This brings me to the second major insight, the focus on structure over culture. Bahcall's analogy of a phase transition is more than just a clever metaphor. It's a profound truth. We can preach a culture of innovation all day long, but if the underlying structure of our organization rewards politics over project success, our words are meaningless. Ice doesn't melt because you give it a pep talk. It melts because you change a fundamental condition, the temperature. Similarly, organizations don't become more innovative because of a new mission statement. They change when you adjust the real, tangible structures, the incentives, the reporting lines, the way projects are transferred between groups. So, how can you start applying these ideas today in your own life, whether you're leading a company, a small team, or just your own career? Here are 3 simple actions you can take. First, identify the artists and soldiers around you. The artists are the ones with the crazy ideas, the ones who are always questioning how things are done. The soldiers are the ones who excel at execution, at delivering on time and on budget. Ask yourself, are the artists being protected? Do they have a safe space to fail and experiment, or are they constantly being judged by the soldiers' standards of operational excellence? Creating even a small, informal Loonshot nursery can make a world of difference. Second, the next time you receive negative feedback on an idea you care about, practice what Bahcall calls listening to the suck with curiosity, or LSC. Our natural instinct is to defend, to argue, to explain why the critic is wrong. Instead, resist that urge. Get genuinely curious. Ask questions. Why do you think that won't work? What are you seeing that I'm missing? This isn't about being weak. It's about being smart. You're gathering data. You're trying to separate a false fail, a flaw in the test, from a true flaw in the idea. And third, think about your own blind side. Are you a P-type person, always drawn to the shiny new technology? Or are you an S-type person, focused on strategy and business models? Make a conscious effort to seek out and understand the other type of Loonshot. If you're a tech person, spend time learning about new business models. If you're a business person, force yourself to learn about an emerging technology. Watching your blind side is one of the best ways to avoid being caught by surprise. That was a summary of Loonshots by Safi Bahcall. We've journeyed through some big ideas today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you explore the territory yourself. The true magic of a book like this happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own experience in an unexpected way. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time and attention. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity or resonated with a challenge you're facing, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see innovation, leadership, and even the course of history. Also, if you found this journey valuable, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.